Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Graham Sheldon. This is Red Komodo, Worth the Buzz, question mark. This is, of course, CS Presents, a series of nearly weekly inspirational and educational webinars from creative professionals around the world. A couple of items right off the bat here. Please ask questions by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. If you put them in the comments, we probably will be able to put them into the questions over here, but it just makes it easy if you use the Q&A button. Thank you to Creative Solutions made up of Teradek, Small HD, and Wooden Camera for their support of this stream. And of course, don't forget to follow their social channels. If you're joining us on YouTube, please make sure to click subscribe on Teradek's channel. That's a vote for us continuing to do more of these. Okay, let's dive in. We're talking coffee, cameras, and content creation with DGA Director Cole Walliser. Hello, Cole.
What's up, Graham? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I have my coffee actually right here with me. We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But Cole, you have sort of a multi-hyphenate background, and I think it makes sense for you to sort of introduce yourself for those who may not know your work in particular. I mean, you start off with a psychology degree, you are a content creator, you're a director, you're all of these things. So what is it that you do?
Oh, man. I mean, yeah, as you said, I do a lot of things, but I think that, predominantly the intro is correct. Director, I am in the DGA. Like most directors, my path to where I am was a convoluted one. Though I do think that my degree in psychology does aid my career now, but obviously not based on it, right? But yeah, so I do a lot of short form stuff. So music videos, commercial, digital content work. I make my own content on my own platforms as well. Trying to write, and most recently doing this sort of coffee venture as my pandemic passion project.
Very cool. Now here's, whenever I speak to somebody with a bunch of hyphens like you, I'm a producer, I'm a DP. It's always a struggle for me to sort of figure out what should I be doing on a minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour business on a career level. And of course, 2020 made things just that extra bit of complicated. How are you deciding how to prioritize your time? I know you have this new coffee venture as well. I mean, what are your priorities on a daily basis, I guess?
I think that despite the fact that I do a lot of things and I have my hand in a lot of different sort of avenues, the deciding factor is my career as a director. That's the main focus. And even my adventure in this social content and creating a bunch of, and sort of being more labeled a content creator, it's all in service of my career as a director. So I know that fundamentally, like that's the baseline for where I'm making my decisions. And if these other things don't fall in alignment with that, then it's not worth my time. Sometimes the reasoning is a bit roundabout, you know what I mean? Is really starting a coffee company in service of my career as a director? But I have reason.
That's gonna be my follow-up. Yeah.
There is a way to think or to believe that it does. And I think that the very short answer is, I mean, obviously I love coffee and this is a fun thing to do. And it's a thing that I want to grow into the future in my career. But in the short term, the quick answer is it gives me an avenue to create content that is more than just me doing random things. The content serves the coffee, and the content also serves my career as a director. The more I put effort into social content, it's really helped my career as a DJ director grow. So there's an argument for any avenue to make more social content and dive into this content creation world. It actually does service me as a director. And so the argument is that coffee actually helps facilitate that. And I have a lot of plans in the future, also using this camera right here to make cool, engaging, fun content in service of coffee, which is in service of my career as a director. So it all fits in somehow. Whether that's true or not, I mean, I make up fake reasons for a lot of things. So who knows if that one's real or fake?
No, it sounds real to me. Well, so I'm drinking this right here. Great logo, by the way. So I'm drinking the first draft plum and floral notes. I'm getting those right now. So you have a space in Santa Monica right now, right? As of 2 weeks ago? No, tell me about the coffee company specifically. Then we'll dive into Komodo.
Sure. Yeah. So the coffee company, I mean, coffee is a thing that I've recently just become obsessed about. And it's a part of my nature that when I am interested in something, I do like a real deep dive. So I start learning about growing and you know, like how crops are processed and all these things, and like what really goes in to get a great cup of coffee. And it has always been sort of I've always wanted something in addition to just filmmaking, you know what I mean? Like whether that's a huge part of my overall career or like a small little fun thing on the side, I've always wanted something a little that's just out of that world, you know what I mean? Like diversify a little bit, right?
Balance.
So yeah, the pursuit of coffee was that, and I just sort of accrued a bunch of knowledge, and I was just really just dove deep into coffee and how to make a great cup, and I was obsessed with making great cups of coffee at home. And it just sort of was like the original idea of coffee was more of a direct promotion for my career as a director. My original idea was a year ago around this time. I was like, oh, it'd be cool instead of sending like Christmas cards or thank yous or whatever to producers and production companies that have hired me over the year. It'd be cool if I sent them like a bag of coffee, like with my logo on it, because then it's like they could get it. It's different. All I need out of that is for them to think of me, be like, oh yeah, Cole, like maybe we'll hire him again this year. That's the whole idea of like sending a Christmas card. I was like, whatever I can do to stand out. So I was kind of like, oh, I could make coffee and send that as a gift, as like a thank you / reminder that I exist. And then when I went through the process to figuring that out, I was like, well, I can also probably sell these, you know what I mean? Like I'm making them for thank you gifts. And so that really just opened the door, and I just started learning more. And then I was like, okay, well, like, you know, I'm doing all this work as sort of promo. I might as well just really dive in and start a company. And that was kind of the inception. And then all these ideas of like content and integration into my career happened after the fact.
I mean, what you're talking about, if I had to boil it down, is you're talking about ways to have a long-term career in an industry which is very hard to, you know, have just a long career, to be quite honest. And reminding people by sending them coffee, I think is a great idea. Do you have any other tips for people out there that are maybe newer or maybe struggling a little bit in 2020 with the nature of the industry as a whole, just how to keep their name front of mind for those people with hiring power, right? So you're sending out coffee, but what are some other things that you've done to be the person that everybody's trying to call to get you to do gigs for them?
Yeah, I think that like you know, your work and your demeanor, I think, and your like attitude go a long way. For the vast majority of my work has been from referrals and repeat clients. Like people like working with me, you know what I mean? At least I assume that based on the fact that they call me again, right? So yeah. I think that like bottom line, if you're good to work with and do good work, you focus on those. Because I think that like the idea of focusing on oh, I want to be on their mind, it detracts you from like what you're really trying to do. I think if you do a great job at being a great person and working hard and doing great work, you will be on their mind. So it's more important, like that's more the foundation to have like a long-term career. And then I think like anything you can do to sort of bump yourself up to the front of their mind to remember like, oh yeah, they're great is a helpful thing. But to be honest too, I've never really done like much promotion, like Christmas cards and emails. Like I'd email people to check in, like, hey, like how you doing? Like letting you know about this or that. But honestly, the coffee thing was almost like the first sort of like mass approach at like trying to do some form of promotion in my career. And I've been a director for like over 10 years. And this was like last year, I was like, maybe I should do some promotion, you know? Perhaps I've been fortunate in that, but I think it really relies on the idea of, you know, being good to work with and doing good work. But also I think one tip that I could impart onto people wondering about this is really take the approach of be in it for the long game. You know what I mean? Like everything I do is all about the long game. Like coffee, selling coffee online, like a lot of sort of quote unquote influencers will do like a merch drop or whatever, put a bunch of shirts or hoodies or whatever and try to sell a whole bunch and make money. I'm making no money on this. It's taking all of my time and I'm making no money. But I'm like, in 2-3 years, this might be a thing that's profitable on a bigger scale. And like, that's my intention with it. I want to grow it to be something substantial. I don't do anything to just make a buck or like think about what next month is. It's all about the long term. So I think that just approaching your own career with that mindset will help you make decisions that will fundamentally help your career last rather than thinking about next week or next month, which I don't mean financial. If you have problems next week or next month financially, you got to figure it out, right? I just mean like career strategy, what you need to be doing.
Yeah, exactly. Couldn't agree more. Okay, so let's talk about the Komodo Stormtrooper behind you. Is it the Stormtrooper? It's white, right?
It
Yeah.
is a stormtrooper. Yeah,
Okay,
it is.
great. And I mean, so this is kind of a disruptive camera in general, right? I mean, this is a sub $10,000 Red cinema camera. They had a Raven that was kind of in that price point, but once you kitted it out, it was over 10. So talk to me about why did you end up being an early adopter of the Komodo, and why for you is it such an exciting camera?
Yes. So for me, to explain a little bit of context in this answer, I'd always been on the, well, not always, but for the past few years, I've been on the verge of buying a cinema camera. Probably about 4 years ago, when the Alexa Mini came out, I was shooting a bunch of content for CoverGirl, and we'd be shooting on the Mini a lot. And I was always like, oh, like we'd do like multiple shoots a year that were multiple days long with like high-end talent. And I was working a lot, and I was like, oh, should I buy an Alexa? It probably would make sense. I should do it if I do it right now. And I ended up not doing it. And I sort of like half regret it. I was like, I should have got in. I could have been working it all these times, but I didn't quite pull the trigger. Then when the Gemini came out a couple years ago, I was like, oh, should I buy a Gemini? It's like getting a little cheaper, and like, Red's really doing some amazing stuff. I was like, should I buy Gemini? And I decided against it. So I like prior to the release of the Komodo, I had like almost pulled the trigger a couple times. And so now, with the camera being so relatively inexpensive, that was a huge factor in my decision. But it also was like, it happened during the pandemic. And so I started thinking about what my career is how it's gonna change throughout this pandemic. Because once, we were in like April, May, and June, I was like, oh, this isn't this 2 week thing. Like, we're in this till like fall or next year or longer. So it's like, how is my career going to change, and how's my career going to be affected by this circumstance? And it occurred to me that, okay, like we're going to want to obviously have fewer people on set. And I feel like budgets are always going down. Like any reason for a budget to go down, I'm like, oh, budgets are going to go down, And I was kind of like, if I can avoid hiring a DP, and then also like going to a rental house or paying the DP for a camera, like I can DP my own stuff. And if I had my own cinema camera, my whole kit, I don't need to go to anybody. I could just do sort of content-y type jobs with my kit. You know what I mean? Like, let's say CoverGirl calls again. I'm like, I'm ready. I got everything we need. So those two factors, and the camera being relatively cheap, really put me over the edge, enough to the point of like on my phone waiting for the announcement of like, put your pre-orders in, emailing Jared, be like, yo, I want in, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And trying to do it as fast as I can, you know what I mean? Because I was kind of like, oh, this is it. This is the moment. All of the specs that the camera was released with, I was like, oh, this is going to be a game changer. I didn't know what Red thought or what other people thought, but when I read about it, I was like, oh, this seems like it's going to, like you said, disrupt the industry.
So wait, I have a question here from Jeff P. Jeff P is answering question, is this about coffee? Jeff, the answer is partially, yeah. A little coffee, a little camera. So there we go. Answered.
I mean, you probably
Moving
drink
on.
coffee more days than you turn on a camera. So,
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so so as somebody who's had that hat on before, where I've had to DP and direct, that can be tricky, and the form factor of the camera means a lot, right? If you're behind an Alexa LF, you can't even see the talent. That might be one of the nice things about the Komodo. I'm not sure, but how do you balance DPing and communicating with your talent and making it feel like they're the first priority? Do you know what I mean? How do you balance that?
Yeah. It's tricky. What I realized is that any additional job on set other than directing sort of takes away from your directing. When I first started, I did everything, of course, like a lot of people. You're just like, it's you and like 3 friends, and you're doing all the jobs. You know what I mean? You're setting up the mic and the lights, you're telling talent what to do. And I got to experience going from doing literally every job to slowly being able to hire one other person so I didn't have to do that job. So I'd slowly be like, okay, let me get a sound person. I don't have to think about sound. Okay, let me get like just a gaffer. So it's like one person helping with lighting. Then it's like gaffer and grip. And it's like, now it's like, I have a DP. Now I have, grip, a G&E team. And I sort of was able to step by step grow my crew. So I didn't have to worry about anything else. And I remember like early on in my career being on set for music videos or whatever, and showing up and being like, oh, like I only have to think about directing. You know what I mean? Like this is my only responsibility. And I really saw how my mind got a lot clearer, and like how I was able to focus more, and like how I was able to be more effective as a director. So I think for me, adding on this DP thing, it's just taking one step back into experience that I've already done. And like it does somewhat detract, but you know, now I've had so much more experience as a director, I really understand that a lot better. And I'm able to take on a little bit more without it being too distracting. So it's just like a thing that you're juggling. And like you said, you wear many hats. And I think probably the vast majority of people in this webinar do a bunch of different things. It's just a thing that you know, you just can, you
comes from experience.
Yeah.
You know where your you know where your line is, right? Cole, you know, if you take this one extra hat, you got a problem, right? And
totally. So it's knowing where your limits are, and knowing what you can handle and what you can't. And I think that, I mean, it's always good to challenge yourself a little bit. And that's a thing that's exciting to me about this, because it's like, I clearly do not have as much experience as a DP as I do as a director. But I've always, like from day one, tried to understand as much as I can. I've probably operated a little bit more than say like lit or I mean, I've never even gaffed anything, but you know, it's the challenge is really fun and fascinating. And that's actually a thing that's really exciting for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. In a way, you know, you've been able to get more crew positions open up as your career has progressed. And then with things happening in 2020, that's sort of your argument for buying the Komodo, to wearing multiple hats. Yeah, so it's an interesting sort of journey. Speaking of the journey, I have a question here from Jane, who says, Cole, you touched on this a little bit, but Cole, how has your degree in psychology informed your work as a director? Specifically, she's asking director, but.
Yeah, Jen, that's a great question. And so I think there's two facets to that answer. The first one is psychology is all about how people perceive things and how people understand the world around them. And when you are directing a thing or creating a film or a piece of content or whatever, you're trying to affect that person. Like that's the whole idea, is like what I'm doing on this little mini world, this screen, is like trying to facilitate some type of emotion, some type of a reaction in your brain. And psychology is all about like how we feel and think in our brains, right? So the ideas and concepts that I learned about how people react and perceive and understand things are subtly applicable to every aspect of directing. I think the more you understand about people's emotions and how people perceive and understand things, be it on a own personal interest level or on an academic level, like having a degree in psychology, is beneficial, because that's what filmmaking is. It's the psychology, it's the understanding of our world and the understanding of like what's happening on our screen or what we're seeing with our own two eyes. And so, yeah, concepts I've learned about people, it was really helpful. The second thing was work ethic. I've always said to myself, if I moved to LA straight out of high school, I would have just like partied, like totally just like done whatever I wanted, you know what I mean? And like not actually been able to hunker down and work hard. So the work ethic I learned in getting a degree was really helpful in my career when I got to LA, to know and understand how to work hard and how to like achieve your goals. I think that, at least for me, Graham, you have frozen. I don't know if I'm also frozen or not. Do we have any, am I good?
You're good.
I'm good?
Yep, Graham will
so
be
Graham
back
just sort of went down for a sec. Copy.
Yeah.
Well, let's just keep talking. How about I just keep answering some questions? Yeah, so I think that like work ethic was a big thing for me learning in university, for sure. Let's see. Alex has a question. How do you work around the sensor crop when shooting lower or higher res frame rate? So Alex, with the Komodo, yeah, you're right. When you change the frame rate, the camera crops in above 40, above 60, I think. When you start going over 60 and above, it starts cropping in. The short answer is I basically just avoid it. I feel like when you're cropping in on a red sensor, it induces a lot of noise, and then also the frame size changes, which is just generally annoying. So I by and large, like, that's not why I bought this camera, is to do any sort of high speed. I've done slow-mo stuff. I've actually shot, again, coffee is slow-mo at 120 cropped in at 2K. and it looks pretty good for sure. It's just not a thing that I use a lot. I do use 6K 40 frames. Yeah, 6K actually 48 frames quite a bit, because you can retain the entire sensor and still overcrank your camera to be twice as fast. So when I'm shooting different sort of beauty or some movement where I just want to slow down the motion a little bit, I'll do 6K 48 a lot, and there's no degradation in quality at all. Graham, you're back.
Right. And I'm back. Sorry about that, everyone. Technical
all good.
glitch.
I took the reins for a sec. Don't worry about it.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Great. Question for you, Cole. Let's talk accessories for the Komodo, because good accessories are kind of serving the shooting style that you in particular have. Bad accessories are getting in the way and actively in conflict with what you're doing. So why don't we start first with how wooden camera accessories specifically have helped your particular shooting style, and then maybe you can go into a little bit more information about what your shooting style is. Do you find yourself most often handheld, shoulder, sticks, dollies?
Sure. Yeah. So my shooting style, I'll answer it this way. With the Komodo, has been super varied on purpose. I've tried to build this camera out as many different ways as I can, because I want to like see what it's like. The form factor is brand new for me. You know what I mean? Like I haven't really nobody's really operated a cinema camera this small before, right? So, you know, like this is I don't know if you know what this build is. This is massive battery on the back, no matte box on the front. This is like one of the experiments. This is actually on a shoot for my buddy's company called One Bottle. We did a commercial for him. We shot on the Komodo for it. And so by design, I've been doing really small builds, really big builds. I haven't really developed like one particular size, dimension, style of build that I love over others. I think if anything, what I love is the ability to do a variety of builds with this camera. That's what's so cool. So you can put rails, full matte box on, follow full focus, and do a whole cinema thing, or you can pare it down with 2 Canon batteries and a lens and like a top handle, and you're good to go and run around and get all these cool shots. So I think that's actually the appealing thing about the Komodo. As far as wooden camera, the cage is super, super helpful. I really like, there's 2 things that I really like about the cage. So the first is like, obviously top handle. We haven't mentioned this, but like I started filming with skateboarding. So it's like skateboarding videos, always top handle back in the day. And so it's so natural for me to hold and operate a camera of this size with a top handle. And so that's super, super handy. And then the V-mount battery mount, I guess, which enables you with a Canon battery to hot swap your V-mounts. And that is super, super handy. So that's like an accessory that I think really, really does well, because just hot swapping is so just beneficial, not to power down, not to double check your settings, not to just take so long. And so just to be able to pop off a V-mount, put a new one on, it powers all your accessories, and like you're up and running in 15 seconds. I mean, you honestly could do it during a take too. You could, like, the camera will still be rolling. So it's like there is actually 0 downtime if you want it, you know what I mean? So that's also another thing that's super, super handy. Yeah, like shoulder mount has been good. I have the shoulder rig from Wooden Camera. I haven't used that as much. We use it on the shoot, obviously, but you know, I haven't used it that much out of it, outside of that. But yeah, it's like everything is great. It's like the arm there with the monitor, you know, you can position it any way you want. So it's like all of these accessories have been really helpful in being versatile and doing different builds, from like these shoulder rig setups to super, super light to a full sort of cinema rig. I've tried it all, and it's been fun experimenting with it for sure.
Gotcha. Cole, before we move on to sort of monitoring and wireless, I had a question earlier that when my internet decided to die, went away, but it involved audio into the Komodo. Are you doing any audio into the Komodo these days? Do you have an entirely separate mixer for that? Do you have even a take on the audio?
Yeah. Again, it varies. So I was shooting a bunch of content for this film called Dog, which is Channing Tatum's next movie, which is really cool for me. I've known and worked with Channing for a number of years, and so they were gearing up to start production in August, September. Obviously, I'm like, oh, you probably need like behind the scenes and EPK stuff. I had just gotten the Komodo. I was like, let's just do it. Like, let me just be on the team and like hang out and shoot some stuff. And they're like, great, awesome. So we shot like a ton of rehearsal stuff. I shot a bunch of behind the scenes throughout the film. I shot a bunch of interviews. And so obviously for that content type stuff, it's just one man band. So it's like me and the Komodo. And so I was running different mics into the audio input, and it's pretty good. It's not like, obviously you get a sound mixer, you get a proper sound recorder, it's going to be better, but it's totally functional. It works well. And with a good shotgun mic, it's like you're picking up what you want to get, you know what I mean? And it makes it super easy just having the 1/8 of an inch headphone jack as the input. You don't have to deal with like XLRs, and then it's sort of, for better or worse, it forces you to get a mic that has its own power. But it enables the camera to stay really small while still getting decent audio. So it's been helpful for sure.
Those are the best gigs too, where someone's just like, go get cool things.
Yeah, hang out and shoot, and I'm like, great, I'm there. I'll be there for 2 months. Let's do it.
Sign me up. Okay, so
it was actually a little side story about that, actually. So the DP of Dog is Tom Siegel, who shot Drive, Bohemian Rhapsody, Usual Suspects. And so obviously the Komodo hadn't come out when we started shooting rehearsal, hadn't come out. And so I was on set, he was in the office for a meeting, and he saw the Komodo. He started geeking out. He's like, oh, like that's a new Komodo. And we were just like geeking out over cameras. I'm like, oh, this is crazy. Like Tom is such a G, and like his career has been amazing. And so we were like two kids with a new toy, talking about the camera and what it could do. And then lo and behold, 2 days later, he shows up. He's like, oh, I got a Komodo. He's like, I called Red and I got a Komodo. I was like, of course you did. But we ended up using it on the film for a number of shots, which was really cool. We shot the film on Sony Venice, and obviously it's a big camera. You can't put it everywhere. There was a number of times where he rigged up the Komodo and put it in random little spots with a couple Canon batteries, and we shot with it. It was really, really cool.
Yeah, on sort of in the high-end feature world, I think that was part of the design intent too, is I dislike the term crash camera because that suggests we're going to destroy this partial work of art, right? But crash cameras, sticking cameras in places that previously...
I mean, that was their term. And so my question is like, how much did they think that what has happened was going to happen? Because to me, it's like, it's almost inevitable. But it's like, they were always like, oh, it's a crash cam for like big movies and this and that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure everybody's just gonna buy this and shoot with it. I wonder if that was like a marketing angle, or like that was truly their intent. I don't know, but yeah, it's an interesting how it evolved from that initial sales pitch for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I have a quick question here from Alex. What are the use cases for the Komodo? Why is this camera I think he means, why is this camera better than something of an equivalent price point? Well, Alex, obviously there's not too many cameras from Red, in fact, none with this price point. So.
Well, yeah, but I mean, price point, maybe he's talking about, Blackmagic or,
sure,
like other, like now the Canon C70 or whatever it is. And I think bottom line is Kodak, really. Like Red RAW is the main reason why you would want to shoot with this over anything else. The Red codec is unbelievably powerful. You have so much information, and the workflow is fantastic. So it's like, that's really the reason. It's the same workflow out of their 50, 60,000 VistaVision cameras, you know what I mean? So it's like, and you're getting pretty much the same quality. Resolution, of course, different, you know what I mean? But latitude and dynamic range and noise is like, the Komodo is performing exceptionally well. So that's kind of it. You're really getting a $30,000 camera and a $6,000 body. It's amazing. And that's why there is so much buzz about it, because you're like, not only are you getting like the quality of like a $30,000 camera, you're actually getting features that these $30,000 cameras do not have. It's over delivering. You know what I mean? It's like, they don't have global shutter. Like almost no cameras have global shutter, and this one has a global shutter. You know what I mean? Having this like Wi-Fi full camera control built in, like cameras don't have that. You know what I mean? Like Arri does kind of, but it's like it's not really. This works so well out of the box. You know what I mean? Having the built-in LCD is like I think the initial thought is like, oh, it's like a DSLR or like whatever. It's like not high. It's like not cinema to have an LCD on the camera. But if you don't think that, and you're like, well, what's actually just practical it's practical to have a LCD on the camera, you know what I mean, to control things and look at things. So it's like, just, you know, do it, right? And so, yeah, it really over delivers and overperforms in a lot of the aspects of cameras these days. And that's part of what the buzz on it, I think.
And look, if you're already in the Red Cinema ecosystem, then this is a no-brainer. Like, you already understand the R3D workflow, you get all of that stuff, and you just have now a smaller camera that plays nice with your bigger cameras too. For some of you in that position.
Most of the people that I know that have bought the Komodo are already Red owners. It probably, maybe it's half and half, maybe it's more people buying the Komodo as a second Red camera. That's happening a lot. You know, they have the accessories, they know the workflow, they understand it. So they're like, oh, like, yeah, $6,000 for a second body, I'm in, you know?
Yeah. Well, look, it has the LCD screen on top, which, while great for camera control, isn't perfect for everything. You need a quality monitor to put on there. Can you talk about what's on your rig specifically behind you, Cole? Like, how do you have it rigged up there monitor-wise?
So I have the Focus Pro 5-ish on here from Small HD. It's fantastic. I've had a couple different monitors, but this is the one that has generally been staying on my camera. And it's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think that like the touch screen is super helpful. Not only does it make sort of the bezel small and you don't have any buttons, but just like swapping between, you probably can't see this, but basically swapping between different panels gives you different readings for exposure, focus peaking, and whatever you want. So that's like just super helpful, because the amount of times you're looking at a shot and you're like, oh, I want to check this focus, you just slide over, double check focus, or check exposure, slide over twice. You know what I mean? And so that's super helpful. That just like whatever is quick to get the job done is kind of not the most important thing, but a super valuable aspect of anything. That the simplicity of use is so paramount, because if it's cumbersome to use, you're just not going to use it. If it's cumbersome to check exposure, I'll more often than not go, that's probably right. Just keep shooting. You know what I mean? So having it be really easy to double check your work is super handy, because everybody in this chat that's ever shot something has shot something that they've cared about that was out of focus. So, you know, the easier you can to check that every single time, the better your work's going to be. And it helps.
Yeah, and like with anything, you have to have confidence in the tools that you're using, and know that they're, in the case of monitors, not lying to you too, right? And so that's, you know, I've used Small HD products for a long time, and I just know kind of what I'm going to get out of the box. It's going to work like this. I'm going to have access to all these tools, and yeah, again, sort of a no-brainer. And then, of course, the wireless workflow with the Komodo, it's kind of a special camera. It has 4K out over SDI, which puts it in sort of a unique crowd when it comes to cameras out there. And of course, with Bolt 4K, I mean, wireless 4K is now very much a thing. And Small HD, with their new line of 3 4K production monitors, now you can view all the 4K that you want. So Cole, in your opinion, I mean, why is better resolution on a monitor a good thing?
I mean, it has a variety of benefits. I wish I was fortunate enough to have dialed in the 4K workflow, but I have not yet had a chance to play with that aspect of the camera. But I can tell you this, you know, like, I shoot mostly in 6K, and I punch in not a lot, but I definitely do it, especially on, like, if it's doing like content stuff. If it's like a, you know, an official music video thing, I probably will only resize just a little bit. I just tend to do my best to get everything I want in camera. But if we're running around getting content stuff, you're resizing all the time. And so the idea that you can see sort of further into the frame with better resolution, you can see what it's going to look like when you're punched in, is super beneficial. You know what I mean? In addition to the idea of like wireless, like what I've been doing lately is not only sort of like directing and DPing, but also often being in the thing. Because my socials have grown so much, there's been this new avenue of like my on-camera work. And it's been quite interesting to sort of stand there on a set, holding a wireless monitor with the camera pointed at me, like making adjustments to me in the frame as I'm doing it. It's kind of a weird, funny situation. But the only way you can do that is with a wireless monitor. You know, like, I need to be sitting there in the scene holding it, you know, and like being able to adjust things. And I just think that in that instance, like resolution really, really helps. I'm not like one of those. I'm more like, oh, dynamic range is better than resolution. Like there's definitely people that are like, oh, more resolution, more resolution. I don't prescribe to that thought when it just comes to your actual footage. Like I don't think that 8K is better than 4K. You know what I mean? I'm not like pushing that at all. I would rather have more dynamic range. But when you're monitoring it, I think it is helpful, right? I think that the more accurate you can see your footage on set, again, the better it's going to be. We spend all this time calibrating our monitors, trying to see everything. Like, let's imagine the version where you are shooting a project in 4K and you're spending all this time calibrating your monitors. You have it all set up perfect. Your DIT 10 is like all in dark and it's like perfect, but you're monitoring on a 1080 monitor. So it's like, there's things you're inevitably not seeing, you know what I mean? And with 4K just becoming the standard and moving towards 4K delivery, it's like, it's imperative that we see that on set, you know? So I just think that like, it's great. Everything is always like playing catch up, and having 4K wireless is just a good step in having everything catch up to the same level, and being able to really get a better idea of what you're seeing on set.
Well, there's a reason, right, that coffee cups end up in Game of Thrones and jeans wearing crew members end up in The Mandalorian, because if somebody had been looking at a 4K monitor like right here, maybe would have caught that stuff.
Yeah,
I don't know.
definitely.
But it happens in amazing franchises that we all know and love all the time.
Well, that's an interesting thing too. It's because I think that you think like, oh, they're shooting Mandalorian or they're shooting Game of Thrones. It must be like this super well-oiled, precise machine that like everybody has their role and like everybody is like doing exactly what they need to be doing. The secret is like those sets are just as hectic as the sets with you and your two friends running around trying to get footage. Like they're exactly the same. Everybody's just running around trying to figure it out. People are screwing up all the time. People are taking shortcuts all the time. And it's more similar than dissimilar. And that was like a big myth. Like that was like a big dispelling of a myth as I grew from like small community of like friends running around doing tiny little jobs for $100 to doing shoots that were $100,000-$200,000, like for like big companies with big marketing dollars and people behind them. And I'm like, oh, this is just as crazy as before. Like there's nothing different, you know what I mean? And so I think that's like a thing to think about as well. It's like those big sets are like, your small set is more similar to those big sets than dissimilar for sure.
100%. Yesterday, Cole, this is a true story. I'm working on a set, biggest fast food chain on the planet. There's a table in the shot. The wide shot is different from the close-up. And I know this of what's on that table. And I say, you know, we've moved on. It can't change. And I just tell everyone, this is someone on IMDb will see this and comment. So it's like an IMDb goof. And I say it now live on set as we're doing it. Yeah. You kind of have to live with that. You get a couple IMDb goofs a thing, you know?
We're always just doing our best job and nobody's perfect. You know what I mean? It's like just the way films are made. You just you try to catch everything, but you know, you just do your best you can, always.
But that's such a freeing idea too. I don't want to just blast past that. It's like where indie films are similar to Marvel films, there's just more people and more C-stands. If you look at it like that, your career can sort of has an infinite growth trajectory. If you look at it like that, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I've always tried to look at it that way. You know what I mean? Like for sure, because the idea that there's this invisible barrier that I can't break through, whether or not it is there, it benefits me to think that it's not there. You know what I mean? Like, because I'm like, if it is there, I'll hit it and like, there's nothing I can do about it because this is this invisible barrier that I do not control. But for me, worrying about it, thinking about it, wondering where it is, that's only gonna impede my progress in getting there. And maybe it only exists because I think it exists, right? So I do my best to just sort of not think about that and push on.
And throughout it all, be a nice person on set.
Absolutely.
Okay. I have a question here. What lens adapters do you use for your Komodo? What about drop-in filters? Have you tried any of those options?
I have not tried any of the drop-in filters. It would be a fun thing to play with, though I've gone just the traditional 4x565 filters for this camera. So I use a PL-RF adapter. I have this Kippertie one on the camera now, and I also have the Canon EF that came with the Stormtroopers. Though I've almost never put an EF lens on it. I think all of the lenses I have are all PL. Now I have a bunch, I also shoot on Sony, like I have my own personal fun camera, like Sony A7 III and A7R. I have a bunch of Sony G glass, but it's fortunate that it doesn't fit on there's no G to RF, E mount to RF adapter to put the Sony glass on here. So I've only really done the PL glass, which, I just don't own any EF glass, but I have that adapter, and it would be a fun thing. I've played with autofocus on it, and it's surprisingly good. I did a video with Potato Jet on the Komodo with Gene, and we played around with EF lenses and the autofocus and tested it out, and it was a lot of fun, and it really performed well.
Very cool. So I want to talk about the social aspect for a second, because obviously you have this great following online, and there's this question, like, how much time do you devote to creating that content? You were talking about being on camera yourself versus sort of doing the job in the classical sense. Like, how do you balance that? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. I think, like, this year's a little different, obviously. You know what I mean? Yeah. Going into the pandemic in March, I had a ton of jobs I was really excited to do. I was directing 2 DGA commercials in back-to-back weeks in March. I had this other big shoot coming up in April, and I was like, someone's knocking on my door. I'm not going to answer that. I had so a bunch of jobs coming up, and they unfortunately got canceled, and so my directing career essentially got put on hold for the vast majority of it. Production has just started back up, in the past couple months, but for the first 6 months, everything just got put on hold. So I was only left with doing social content. You know what I mean? Wow. And so that was a fun thing to be like, okay, well, I'm gonna dive full in on this because I'm not directing other jobs really. This is a thing that I can control and I can take care of. So it's been more of a focus on that this year, but in prior years, I've only sort of had amassed a following, say, the past 2 years is sort of when I've been social has been a thing for me, I guess. And then in previous years, it's always just a thing that I started looking at it as an aspect of my directing career. It's not social is a career and directing's a career. I'm they're the same. The more time I spend on social, like I mentioned at the start, the more it benefits my directing career. So it's your new website, it's your new portfolio, it's your new resume. That's how we're communicating our work. And so, I could ignore it or I could dive full in and just do it. So just added to my workflow or my work sort of agenda. And I just spend as much time as I can doing that aspect of my work, I guess.
Do you try to define your audience, your followers in a specific way and make content specifically that they would be interested in? Have you thought about that? That's
absolutely not.
Really interesting.
I rally against that, but that's my approach. You know what I mean? Because where I want to get with social is being able to make any type of content and my audience is receptive to that because it's me, selling my personality. So which is interesting. I'm not on social. I promote my career as a director, but I don't necessarily sell it. What I'm selling is my personality. So when I go to make content, if I'm going on a camping trip or I'm doing a camera review, whatever I'm doing, it's going to have my personality in it. And so that's the thing that I'm marketing and selling. So I can get to a place where I can do whatever I want on social and it's not going to alienate my audience. You know what I mean? And so I've tried to curate that approach. Rather, if I'm just doing Komodo, I'm going to have to do Komodo forever. And when the Komodo in 5 years or whenever becomes not the hottest thing anymore, what am I going to be doing? Right. And so if the thing that I know I'll have in 5 years and 10 years, it's my personality still. So it's I'll be able to sustain it a lot easier. And so that's sort of, again, I'm looking at the long-term goal. I could probably pop off if I had 5 Komodo videos a week, you know what I mean? Or a month or whatever. Because it's so hot right now. But is that servicing my long-term goal? And it's not really, you know what I mean? And so that's again been my position on social is I'm going to make whatever I want. if you like it, cool. If you don't, fine. I'm not going to try to cater to what I think you want, because I'm only going to miss. You know what I mean? Like maybe I'll hit it this day, maybe I'll miss it next day. But if I'm just like, I'm making my own content that I want to make, I'm hitting that 100% because it's like a thing that I want to do. And if I'm making it, then I'm 100% on target. So I've taken that approach. I think it serves me better.
It serves you better. Do you think that's your advice for like younger, newer content creators that are maybe in a similar space, cinematographers, directors, their 5-year plan maybe is to do one of those things? Is that your advice for them, or is it really just different for different people? Like personality forward isn't the best for everyone. I don't know.
Yes and no. You know what I mean? My advice is like whatever you can do that facilitates you making content, that's the thing you should do. Because my argument for like this personality driven thing is that that's the easiest thing for me to make. You know what I mean? If I'm like struggling thinking about fitting into some box, that impedes my output. And that is more problematic than anything. Because I think that unfortunately for social, it's like it's not necessarily quality, it's quantity. Like the more you can produce, the better, right? And so whatever eases your production or increases your output is a thing that you should be doing. And so it's like if having a niche will help you, like just like I'm just gonna dive in on this and like do this 100% because that helps me make a lot of content, go do that. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, for me that doesn't necessarily work. I do think that it is important to sort of like be not personal, but like infuse your personality in it, because that's what's interesting. I think that even the people that are successful are always have engaging personalities. You know what I mean? And so I think that that's just an important part. Not to get too deep into this approach, but like that's even looking into the future of what social is and what a creator and what an entertainer is. My vision for the future of like what a director is someone that obviously can direct great stuff, but is also this engaging personality that is like fun and charismatic, because it's like all eyes are on everybody now and we all have behind the scenes now. So it's like the famous director in 5 years is going to be a super charismatic person on camera. Gone are the days of these recluse film nerds that sit inside and watch movies all day, that talk to no one, that are super antisocial, that are these savants
in the corner in the dark. Yeah,
those days are gone. They don't exist anymore. You know what I mean? In my opinion. As for the future, like that's where it's going with this person that's like on camera, creative. You know, everything is merging together. The idea of these lines, even of like film star, TV star, social media star, they're all going away. The idea of like director only behind the camera to an actor to a person on camera, like those are all going away, in my opinion. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to position my career to be in alignment with where it's going to be in 5 years.
You know, Cole, you're hitting on something really important, that if there's honestly a couple takeaways from today, I hope this is one of them. That there used to be this weird sense that like if you're this robot person cinematographer that executes perfectly all of the time and you're just kind of quiet and you look at the highlights and you don't talk to people, that is an approach. But also in business and in filmmaking, people like working with human beings. So, and it's so hard to break into people's networks because we like working with the people that we like on our sets and we guard that ferociously. So being a good person that people want to hang out with and work with, honestly, I would hire someone on that side as a producer over someone that maybe takes 5 minutes faster to light a wide shot or something on it, you know? And it kind of comes down to that in business and in filmmaking. Cole, I want to talk about the moment-to-moment communication on set with you as a director, because I was going through your Instagram the other day for the glam bot stuff. And basically you're walking up to these sort of world famous celebrities and you have like 5 seconds to tell them what they need to do. Have you learned something from that process? Because you're able to give them only the information they need to know without freaking them out by this gigantic robot hand. You know, again, in like 5 seconds. Do you have an approach to working with talent, whether they're traditional actors, models, things like that, to make it as crystal clear what you need out of them for the camera?
That's a great question. And I don't know if there's really a thing that I could sort of summarize to be like, oh, you just do this.
Okay.
But let me try to think of what I can say about that. It's definitely a thing that like, it takes practice. You know what I mean? It's all about like, as you said, like we all know that like clarity is key, right? And like being direct and clear is key. So the question it really is like, how do you become direct and clear in what you want in 30 seconds, right? And so I think a large part of what gets in the way is like insecurity or doubt or like questioning yourself, because what happens, this is the bad version where I go up and I'm like, hey, do you want to do a slow-mo thing, and you have to like turn, or maybe you could jump, or like I don't know, like do you want to do a thing? You know what I mean? Like that's like, oh, that's the bad version, right? And so the idea of, I think the thing that helps is like just being like confident in yourself and know that you know what you're doing. And even if you don't know what you're doing, like fake it, because they don't know you don't know what you're doing, and just approach them with like this clear and concise mentality of being like, this is what's going on. Here's my explanation. And then, you can pose the questions of like, do you want to do it or do you want to do something else? But I think that like just having this air of confidence is the thing that really helps. Because if I'm questioning myself, it's only going to make it more confusing, and they're going to be like, what? What do you want me to do? And so, but really a lot of it is practice too. And I got practice, in no job have I had to direct like A-list talent where you get one shot, one take, even like that never happens. In anything else, I've done shoots where we're there all day with like an A-lister, or we're there all day setting up. The A-lister comes for 15 minutes and shoots for 15 minutes, and then we all go home. We've been waiting on them all day. But I still get a couple takes. You know what I mean? I still get a couple takes. And so the GlamBot is very specific in that, and is that it's really only one take. But my experience in those previous things, having worked with like top level talent, really helped, because it's just the practice of communicating with people that you might be nervous to talk to. After you do it a little bit, you're like, oh, this is fine. It just takes a little bit of practice, really.
Yeah, I mean, if directing is a series of 10,000 different decisions and you're just trying to hit like 80% of them are the right decisions, you know what I mean? It's never 100%. I don't think anyone would say that. The just confidence in making a decision, I think you're right, gets you so incredibly far. And that's why I thought the GlamBot project was such an interesting, you have 5 seconds to make a connection and then give them all the directing they need to know, and you get it once and then you move on. So I think that's kind of an interesting.
It's so much more about, and I think this is kind of why it does well in social, is that it's so much more about personality and like people interactions than it is about directing. Like in those things, like what directing thing am I really telling them that's like, oh, he's really like directing them good. You know what I mean? Like it's more about like making them feel comfortable, sussing out like how they feel about what they're going to do. And then really, I'm sort of cutting myself short. The directingness is figuring that out and then maximizing what they're doing on the camera. And I think there is a skill to that, but it's so much more about this interaction. The directing is very much behind the scenes, like in the back of my brain of like, okay, they kind of feel like this. So how can I push them in this direction to get them to do this, which I think will be better? And that's all happening like in the back of my head, sort of behind this interaction. So I guess that's sort of like a tricky skill to do, but I think for any director, you have the thing that you're saying to people and then the 20 things in the back of your head running at all times. And so I think it's just an extension of that. It's just compounded to, like you said, 30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay, a couple questions here. And everyone, just a reminder, keep hitting us with your questions. Use that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Robert Perkins says, personality is definitely why I, a non-DP, non-director, is sitting here tuned into a webcast about a cinema camera. Cole's engaging in a way that makes you interested in what he's interested in. Well, there you go, Cole. That's awesome. Thank you, Robert. Okay, question. Santos on Facebook asks, hi, Cole, what's the major prep you do and or questions that you must get answered from your clients before you go for a new shoot? So he's asking about prep. I'm going to just say it's a directing prep, but
yeah. So the question is what questions I get asked on a new job, kind of?
What prep do you do and what questions do you ask of your clients before you're on set? That's it.
I mean, I think the short answer is it varies all the time. Obviously, it's so dependent on the project. But I think that, let me try to think of like what general things. Here's a thing that I always try to figure out. going into a new job is I always try to figure out like how hands-on the client's going to be, because that's really going to dictate a lot. And that happens every time. Some clients are like super hands-on, they want to control everything, and that's going to make my job better or worse, usually worse, but we'll see, maybe it's better sometimes. And then some people are very much like, okay, like, you handle it, you do this, we're just going to sit back and chill. And I think so I will ask questions to try to get the level of understanding that they have about production, because that really varies always. Sometimes people really know about production and what kind of effects their decisions have, and some people are completely oblivious to it. And that makes a huge impact for how your day goes. All the details about creative and whatever, they're all so project specific, but like that aspect is on every single job. And so I found it beneficial to just get an idea of that, so I know what's coming down the pike a little bit, and how my interactions are going to be with the client or agency or person hiring you. You got to watch out for the switcheroos though, who are like, yeah, no, do your thing. It's totally cool. I trust you. And then are like micromanaging every single little decision. But that always, it comes with the territory a little bit. But yeah, I usually try to figure, that's like a general thing I try to figure out on every job for sure.
The key is, depending on how difficult the client is, Bolt 4K goes 750 feet, put their video village 750 feet away. The really nice ones, put them like 10 feet away from camera.
That's funny. A buddy of mine who's like starting his directing career, it's this guy that's been helping me edit, and he's like starting to direct, and I've sort of been helping him, guide him, and been a resource to answer questions. And so he was doing a big job the other day, and he goes, hey, like, how do you, he asked me advice about it. He's like, how do you deal with like client, like hovering over you, like looking over your shoulder and stuff? And I'm like, the number one thing I add in my rental list is a client monitor. And I put that as far as I can away from where I am, like within yelling distance, like, hey, yeah, you can get my attention if you want to, but like you're over there and I'm over here. So like before you rent anything, rent a client monitor and just get them out of there. That was my first tip.
Living, breathing reason to invest in wireless right there, everybody. Okay, question from Kyle. How do you get recognized as a director if you tend to be a one-man crew? So Kyle, I think that's kind of a 2020 thing for Cole to some extent too, out of necessity. But I think what Kyle's asking, Cole, is the branding question, right? If someone's hiring you just as a director, do the other hyphens make that hiring decision a little confusing for them at all? Maybe that's what Kyle's, I'm trying to distill that a little.
Well, I would say the tricky thing is like, if all of your work is one-man band, you're just not gonna get a job with a 20-person crew. Like nobody's gonna hire you for that, because like, and that's no knock on you, like nobody's gonna hire me to do $100 million movie. I haven't done one. I haven't done anything close to that. So it's like, I think it's important to understand what your body of work like your body of work sort of dictates the jobs that you can get. If it's 100% all one-man band, it's going to be hard to be like, oh, just hire me as a director and we're going to hire 20 people to be a crew. But what I think is important is doing what you can to incrementally get there. So, and I gave this piece of advice to another friend of mine who's sort of dealing with the same thing, asking about like, how can I get to that next level? And I was like, it might take some sacrifice on your part whenever you can afford it, right? Like, let's say there's a one-man band thing and you're like, okay, but this is like a good job, there's a bit of money, I'm gonna hire a DP. So like, I'll have a DP on this job. So just me and this other guy, and maybe it's just you and a DP, but you're doing all the jobs. At least there's a crew member that's under you, you know what I mean? And it's like, then moving forward, like basically once you do it once, you can go to your next client and be like, nah, I hire DPs now. We got to put them in the budget. You know what I mean? Like, did this one with this DP, and like, we got to hire this guy now. So you're like incrementally getting there. And even with me, like I told the story of me progressing. Like I said, it was like one job at a time. We're hiring one more person. It wasn't this thing where it's like, oh, like Cole does really sweet one-man band jobs. Let's hire him to do this 80-person crew for this video shoot. You know what I mean? It's all incremental. There were moments where there's like bigger jumps than others, but it was still like my body of work justified taking that leap of faith with the person hiring me. And so I think it's important to look at how you're viewed in a non-personal level, like what your work is and how you've accomplished it, because that's the thing that they're going to hire you for. And so the only way you can change is just incremental. But, we all want to work all the time. So just make those incremental changes every time you work.
You know, Kyle, this is something I've struggled with too. And to be honest, don't tell anyone, but I'll do a resume where just I'm a producer and then one where I'm just a DP for people who like takes a little bit to kind of get them to wrap their head around a thing. And then once I'm sort of in the door, then you can sort of release those other skill sets if you feel like they're confused by what you do slowly over time. You know what I mean? If you're hired as a producer and you have a UAV license with the FAA, you just bring a drone one day to set. Then suddenly they're okay with you doing all of these things. So
that's
anyway.
a helpful approach too, because it's like then you suddenly start to over deliver. Because if like on day one you're like, okay, I can produce, I can direct, I can fly a drone, I can do this, I can do that, I can do sound, I can do makeup, I can do all this stuff. You know, like they're like, okay, well, come and do it all, and then obviously you don't deliver on one of those because there's too many, right? But if you try to get a job with like, okay, I just direct and DP, that's the only thing I do. You have all these other skills, and then one day you're working and like, you know, someone needs a makeup touch up or they want a drone and you're like, oh, I can do this too. And then suddenly you're like, oh, like this guy can handle everything. You know, there's an idea of that approach of being like exactly what you said. There's a benefit of like pulling these things out and these skills out later as someone that can handle any challenge rather than someone that's like just trying to get every job. You know, one is like this skilled professional and one is like, you know, just trying to grab at anything, right?
There's really truly something to the idea that if when the problem happens, which is inevitable on set, if you're the person in the corner who slowly raises your hand and you fix that problem, I hear a lot of people make leaps exactly like that. I mean, that's kind of the way. Question from Anthony here. What are you using for your follow focus and your run and gun shoulder rig build? Kind of a specific question there for you.
Yeah, totally. I have the, I think it's called the Zip Focus from Wooden Camera. So it's basically just a single geared follow focus. That is for shoulder rig and even like monopod kind of work. When it's super pared down, like if I'm going top handle and just like the lens, I'll just like, it's so small, you can cradle the camera with one hand and reach the focus ring with your fingers. And like when if you're trying to be really little, it's like then you don't need any rods or anything, and it's like literally just one hand operation.
Yeah, and actually, if somebody on the Creative Solutions team, if you don't mind popping some of these items, I've seen you put a couple links up, but it'd be great if people could see the new 4K production monitors. It'd be great if they could see the Zip Focus, just the straight up link to it, and maybe the 5-inch focus too. All right, cool. So another question here for you, Cole, and just so everybody knows, we're going to go about 3 minutes or so longer here, just because I had a little bit of a technical.
Oh yeah, get them questions in.
Yeah. I don't want to leave anybody out. So I have a question here. Does it support HDR? I'm assuming you mean, yeah. Does the Komodo support HDR? I know the Bolt 4K does.
So short answer is well, it's no. I think. Because RED does this like double exposure HDR thing in some of their bigger cameras, and it doesn't do that. But I don't know how practical that really is. I was actually asking a couple DP friends of mine who are RED owners about that, because I think someone else was asking me, and they were like, I've used it twice, you know? Yeah. So to me, it's not a huge thing. Yeah, so cool. I don't think it does do the thing you're asking about, I think.
Fair enough. Anonymous asks, are there times you want a 7-inch on board? Do you ever want a transmitter built into the monitor to keep the rig small? So the Cine 7 has a transmitter, as well as the new Indie monitor has a transmitter built into it. The Focus has a transmitter version. Are you ever doing that at all, Cole? Because that's...
So I'm trying to think. I think I've put the 7-inch on the Komodo before, and it's great, but it's not, I typically just keep the smaller one on there. Yeah. I just don't find, if I know we're going to be like studio mode on sticks and is like AC, you know, it's like, sometimes I might use that as like the AC focus monitor, or a monitor off an arm on the back or something like that, but it's not the go-to, I guess. And then so if I need wireless, I have the Bolt 500 transmitter. We just hook that in, and that's super easy to like daisy chain into the monitor feed. So that's kind of the way I do it.
Yeah, I think part of his question too is, you know, transmitter in the monitor on board versus transmitter not.
Oh, copy. Yeah.
I mean, either works.
Yeah. I mean, like it's whatever you have. So here's the thing. I don't do that because I don't own that piece of equipment, right? Like I have a transmitter and I have a monitor that has a receiver on it. So if I had that, would I use it? Like maybe, sure, it's one less thing to hook up. It's like bulkier, but then it's like if I just owned a monitor that had a transmitter, I would probably use that 100% of the time. You know what I mean? It all works. It's fine. You know, however you want to do it.
Exactly. The answer is however you want to do it. I mean, the point is, you know, go into showrooms once showrooms are back open again in whatever city you're in, and just kind of feel out different types of monitors and find the build that's best for you. I think one of the big takeaways from this is that Creative Solutions has really embraced the Komodo as a camera. And the point is that they have tons of accessories available at Wooden Camera, for example, to build out the Komodo however you want. Small HD even had a limited release of also a white 5-inch focus that really works with the white Stormtrooper paint on the Komodo. And then of course, with the Bolt 4K out, or the 4K out SDI on the Komodo, that suddenly means you're sending your wireless 4K if you are a Bolt 4K user as well. So maybe we can pop a few more links in there in the comments with a few of those, please. CS folks. Okay, guys, that is time. I want to, so Cole, thank you so much for joining us. This was just an absolutely epic conversation about all sorts of things, from coffee beans to cameras to your philosophy on directing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It was tons of fun. I love doing these kind of chats. My reasoning is I never went to film school, and I learned by watching videos, talking to people. And so I'm always happy to kind of give back and share my knowledge and share my experience with the newer up and coming generation.
And, you know, I've noticed also on your social too, maybe for follow-up questions that folks may have, they can just straight up hit you up on your various social channels, and we'll go ahead and put those in the chat now. So if you're not following Cole and his very unique multi-hyphenate psychology-based career, then feel free to start following him right now. So, and of course, can you order just straight up beans online, Cole, or no?
You can order beans at cafecoleon.com. You can get the first draft right here with the slate label. That was there's definitely a lot of film inspired things with this coffee thing. My whole slogan is caffeinate and create. You probably, can you read that? Caffeinate and create. So the whole idea is like you're drinking coffee, you're fueling your creativity. Really, it's for, I made this for people like me who wake up every day, have a cup of coffee, and go create content and go create things. So that's kind of the idea. The website is cafecoleon.com. And yeah, and all my socials are, my personal ones are just my name, just Cole Walliser. So you can find me easy that way.
Easy. All right. So thanks again to Creative Solutions for helping to make this event possible. Please go to cs.inc to sign up for upcoming webinars. We have one right after the holidays, to be honest, coming up. I believe it's January 7th. Don't quote me on that. They're usually about 10 a.m. Pacific. As a friendly reminder, please subscribe to Teradek's YouTube channel. Again, each sub is a vote for continuing to do more of these. Thanks, everyone, for joining. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have a great day.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Coffee's good. Yum.